Nardo!
What go on, man?
So you good? I've been here before. I can recall many nights up at UA, hungry a killer, but guess what? There was some saving grace, a beacon of light and hope. On this episode of Corner Office, we are about to find out more about who? Nardo! Who is Nardo? Where the man you come from? Guess what? Over Nardo we're reaching now.
Yo,
Nardo, pull up to a chair now. Meet us up front, Nardo.
Alright.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Elon Musk says he told Donald Trump that the money spent by USAID or USAID is a grand waste of Americans' money and that he should shut it down. Well, the Trump administration has moved apace and a poison dart has been lodged right in the main artery of international development aid. What are the implications for fighting poverty worldwide? Period poverty, hunger, education, and so many things that ail populations around the world that do not have the benefit of development to fund these critical programs. What are the implications right here at home for Jamaica and Jamaicans? That's the issue to be discussed this evening. Lead story CVM TV as Trump and his policy initiative begin to bite right around the world. It's not a stretch to say that the United States Agency for International Development, USAID or USAID, is one of the most important global organizations. That's why news that all but essential staff have been told to stay home. The doors of the organization headquarters, well, the main offices right around the world have effectively been shut down, and we are hearing that it is to be subsumed, merged with the U.S. State Department, has come not as a shock, but as such a massive disappointment given the ramifications right around the globe. And what are those ramifications? What are the implications of this decision to neuter USAID, to pull back the billions that America spends doing development diplomacy through this organization right around the world? We answer some of those questions here.
For many Jamaicans, pauses on U.S. federal government programs sound like America's business. But the startling reality for many in Jamaica on projects and in organizations funded by the U.S. government, the changes in the U.S. have crossed borders. The Trump administration has put a halt on the United States Agency for International Development, USAID for short, which was established in 1961 by President Kennedy to increase America's reach in the global south and to combat the humanitarian issues across the world. Within the developing world, USAID programs have been used to combat disease outbreaks such as HIV, malaria, and Ebola, to name a few. In the Caribbean, USAID was very active in the 2020 Haiti earthquake humanitarian response and has helped in responding to many natural disasters that have registered destruction in the region. USAID has long played a vital role in supporting Jamaica's development and strengthening its public institutions. Through a range of initiatives in health, education, economic growth, and governance, USAID partners with Jamaican government agencies.
All right, we had a technical glitch there with that feature. Let's take a quick break and come right back and pick up the discussion with my two guests.
2025, February 11 to 12 from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at the AC Marriott Hotel under the theme Stay Safe in Cyberspace. Join leading experts and professionals to advance cybersecurity practices and build a safer cyberspace for all. Gain the knowledge and tools to address emerging threats in the digital world. To register and for more details, visit mns.gov.jm. That's the CyberSmart Conference 2025, February 11 to 12 at the AC Marriott Hotel. See you there!
Welcome back to Lead Story here on CVM TV. My guests this evening, Professor Lloyd Waller, he's the director of SALICES, and Anna Perkins is a co-chairperson of the Advocates Network. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, George. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Anna. Professor Waller, you hearing me?
I am hearing you. Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Excellent. Anna Perkins, may I start with you as the lady on the panel? The USAID funding accounts for what? About 0.6% of the annual federal budget in the United States. So when Elon Musk and Donald Trump were talking about cutting government waste, not many people would have identified this organization as one of those that would have been on the chopping block. Hence, this comes as a surprise, is my position. Do you share that position?
Certainly, I share that position, George. I think a lot of aid agencies, a lot of governments, a lot of people who are directly affected may well have been blindsided by this sudden closing off of U.S. aid coming to, certainly in our situation, Jamaica. It's a huge surprise. Lots of very significant fallouts happening from it. And as you gave us that figure, a reasonably, seemingly minuscule portion of the U.S. budget, but very significant outside for those that benefit from the aid.
And on the point of numbers, Professor Waller, the Americans say, well, look, in 2023, for that calendar year, the U.S. spent $68 billion on international development aid, 40 of which went through USAID. So it is responsible for the lion's share of the global international development aid spend. And if we can pull this back, we'll be doing well for the United States. So does doing well for the United States not really mean doing well for the rest of the world anymore? Is that the policy we're seeing being implemented in front of our eyes?
Well, I can't really speak on behalf of the intention of the policy. But the two things I would want to say is, one, that, even though it represents less than 2%, the realities are that this may be just the first of several initiatives to try to see how best to pull back on the resources that are being used externally. Certainly USAID is one, but there are other projects as well. Who's to tell? Perhaps we may see a situation where they'll be talking about the multinationals and their roles in the developing countries and their funding of the developing countries, because a number of multinationals and international foundations as well, engage and provide funds externally, and a part of what they have to do is to go through the US government if anyone has ever gotten any funding from a Bill and Melinda Gates or Open Society Foundation. It is a process. As it relates to the policy, the truth is Trump did campaign on an America First policy. How you want to interpret that, that's a different situation, but he did state upfront and during the entire campaign that his plan was to focus on the United States. This may just be an indication, a beginning or a starting indication that that plan is now coming into action. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what the next phase of this plan is. In the first phase, of course, rollback aid, and I'm even saying rollback aid with a a recognition also that DFID also, I think in 2019, they also merged with another entity. They did a kind of introspection as well, which is the UK's International Development.
Yes, Department for International Development, previously headed by Andrew Mitchell under the Tories government. Yeah.
Right. So that's the UK's version of USAID.
Yes.
And they did do a similar exercise, and they did do some rolling back of the funds that they had provided as well. I think not much though. I think it moved from 1.9 to 1.7, and but nevertheless, that 2% was a substantive amount when you really think about it. So they did do some reorganization, and I think CEDA, I'm using the word CEDA, but I don't think it exists anymore. I think they also did some reorganization, not to the scale and the detriment of what's happening in the United States. And there was also the experience with Australia. Yeah, they also did some reorganization in a similar fashion. Part of what we're seeing is what is called the Trump effect. The reality is that we have 90 days, and we really don't know what the creature will be at the end of the 90 days. It may be a new creature, it may be a creature. They've already indicated that there will be some merger with the State Department. We don't know what the focus is going to be. Right now it's the focus of in Jamaica. The projects that I'm familiar with have to do with crime management, violence management, climate adaptation, HIV/AIDS, health management as well, and I don't know if going further we will see some new projects that focus more on the digitalization of things. I know that's a big for Musk, or even cryptocurrency related projects. Yeah. What I have been doing, to be quite frank, is I've been monitoring, and I think other persons should also look in this regard. It's very difficult to fight this unless you have great lobbyists who can. You have, and you notice emphasis on the word great lobbyists.
Yes.
Right.
Emphasis noted. Emphasis noted.
Great lobbyists. Yeah. Or you can engage back channels independently. Yeah. Or wait until the government does their own negotiation. And remember, Jamaica is just one of 100 and X countries that we have to now negotiate and renegotiate. Yeah. The reality is one last thing. I think for those of us who have access to those things, like myself, we just have to sit and wait, and monitor and look at the emphasis and the themes and the focus, and then pivot and to see how best we can reorganize what we're doing. I mean, climate change, climate adaptation can be repackaged and focus on the digital technology, sensors, and so forth. Similar with health, similar with HIV. There are a number of projects that have to do with that. So we have to just pivot, rethink, and look if we don't have access to great lobbyists. Yeah, and
there are some people who do not pay rapt attention. So they may wonder, well, USAID is undergoing this period of evaluation over 90 days, and it will be transformed. And yes, staff has been locked out, but what's the big deal for Jamaica? Articulate the importance of USAID to various programs and efforts, initiatives, some here in Jamaica.
Well, George, what I think this is doing for many of us, and you say people who haven't been paying attention, it really has caused us to focus on and to recognize just how dependent many of our programs are on these kind of external funding sources, particularly in this case, USAID, that surprised so much too, whether it has to do with small business so that we can assist towards economic growth. A large part of what they do has to do with health too. We know our health system is under a lot of strain. As someone that had to interface with it at the end of December, you get sort of just hit right in the middle of your face there, just how in some spaces our health system is under strain and sometimes a bit ramshackle. And to recognize that a lot of aid is coming in to help that to move forward, whether it's maternal health, a lot of it has to do with HIV/AIDS, retrovirals that can be provided free of cost or at low cost at our health clinics and other spaces like that, or even education, providing nutritional support in spaces where there are vulnerable communities, the elderly, children that are from poorer communities and that kind of thing. Think about, too, the relief that gets provided whenever there's a natural disaster. The recognition that as a nation, we are not yet able to fully take care of ourselves when it comes to recovery from climate events and so on. So it runs the gamut, education, and I think Prof mentioned education, health, crime, violence, cybersecurity, infrastructure development, and maintenance, and so on. So, in a way, if you think it through, even those of us that have been paying attention by the pulling back of the funds, and part of it too, for me, George, is the suddenness of it. Just like that, after a few days, bam, cut off. Local contractors who would supply stuff to the different projects. Local offices, E for Life, all the different spaces are negatively impacted immediately. There was not even a period that would have allowed for it to sort of take effect.
Anna, it fell on our shoulders like bird droppings, just like that. Let's take the break.
A bird drop is not heavy, so think about it.
There you go. Let's take the break and come right back. Professor Lloyd Waller and Anna Perkins are my guests as we talk about the situation surrounding USAID and the fallout, if even the short-term effect of it.
Nardo. So you good? I've been here before. I can recall many nights up at UA, hungry a killer, but guess what? There was some saving grace, a beacon of light and hope. On this episode of Corner Office, we are about to find out more about who. Nardo. Who is Nardo? Where the money come from? Guess what? Over Nardo we're reaching now. Nardo, pull up to a chair now. Meet us up front, Nardo.
All right.
A Nigerian woman telling the Guardian newspaper in the UK today that her last round of HIV treatment she received in December, and she was due to get treatment again in November to collect her medication rather at the end of April. She says she now knows not whether there will be any supplies when she goes to the clinic in Nigeria to collect, given what is happening with USAID. I have Professor Lloyd Waller with me, Director of SALICES, and Anna Perkins. She's co-chairperson of the Advocates Network. Professor Waller, last September, the U.S. Embassy, in concert with the Jamaican authorities and USAID, had an event at Hope Zoo where they signed a $470 million agreement to help disadvantaged youth in Jamaica to provide certain facilitations and certain keys to create certain key situations for them for their development, moving them away from a life of crime and out of poverty. With that thing having been signed last year, it's a 5-year project. So, of course, I don't know if it's an amortization of the spend equally over 5 years or with different tranches. But I'd like to ask for you to explain to my viewers, if you can, how would something like that has already been signed, so it predates this decision with the USAID and these changes, does that contract agreement still live? Is it changed materially? What happens?
Well, in this particular instance, then I don't think the contract would be honored. I think they may have gotten tranches before, because I know one person who just said that they were waiting on a tranche for a project next week, and that has now been terminated. Because the reality is, even though we do have these MOUs and these contracts, they would need to have been sent from the United States. And in this particular instance, if I'm using that experience to judge the experience that you just articulated, it would mean that the funds would be held. I think what they said is that they would have a discussion with the funding agency and the great lobbies that they have access to try to see if they can get at the very least, the next tranche. But I think most of these things will be on hold for the next 90 days at the very least, during which there would be a number of conversations and negotiations about honoring the ones that they have if they can, or if they can't. But outside of that, I should also say to your viewers that the United States is not the only country or organization in the world that provides funding. And in the history of development assistance and the history of humanity, what has always happened is that if a country or an entity or an organization is unable to achieve a public good or a global good, then there are alternative entities that we can turn to for assistance. Other bilateral organizations, UK, Canada, Koreans, the Swiss, and a number of other ones that persons are not particularly familiar with.
Yes.
And then we also have international foundations like Open Society Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a number of foundations that exist that have a lot of funding that have not been tapped into because we have become just so accustomed to the brand name legacy funding agencies like USAID and World Bank and IDB, and but there are a number of international foundations. As a matter of fact, I'll just say it. There is one in Latin America called FRIDA that we got some funds from at UWI in 2016, and they said it was the first since they've been providing funding from the 1990s. We were the first English-speaking person that ever approached them for funding.
Yeah.
And they found it fascinating, and we had a Spanish-speaking person on our project who, I told them to go and search for some possible funding in Latin America. But the bottom line is that this is not roll over and dead.
Yes.
Right? The Chinese symbol for crisis is also opportunity, and people must never forget that.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the Chinese there, Professor Waller, because one of the arguments that is gathering steam is that, look, wherever the Americans create a void, then the Chinese, who are in their mind a destiny for world domination in the way that the US have had such an extended run, they will fill that void. But that's another discussion for another time, but I just had to make that link. Let me ask Anna Perkins this.
I was going to
I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
I would have thought that route though.
But here's the thing.
The geopolitics. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, but Professor, it's funny you talk about the grant that you got in 2016, and the people said that the UWI was the first entity to approach them. It's just like scholarships on campuses. You have the popular ones that every student falls over themselves trying to apply for. And when I was in student government, I had to be literally printing a list of the available scholarships, walking around in the school and begging people to apply for them because they just sat there, nobody applied for them, nobody knew they existed, despite them being on the books year after. So it's a similar situation. And let me ask you this though. In the short term, as people wait for the 90 days to pass for Mr. Rubio and Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump to do their assessment and make their decision, you have staff who will be in limbo. You have programs which will be in limbo. In these situations, many times time lost is time that you can't recoup, because lives that you could have turned into a particular direction, you can't turn them again. And if you miss that chance, that's it. What do you think will happen, especially because our government is not in a position anywhere to be able to provide the kind of funding to tide these organizations and these projects over until better comes?
I don't want to be alarmist, but we do have to take account of the fact that there could be significant fallout. We're going to have children without food. We're going to have elderly people without care. People who are working in these NGOs would be without work. People have to make shifts to pull on whatever savings they have. You're going to find that a lot of the local groups that do charity work and do work to take care of the poor will find themselves increasingly burdened. We're going to have to find ourselves doing the usual kind of creative things that Jamaicans do to survive, to find alternative sources. But I think there's a big lesson there for us as we continue to exist in this kind of geopolitical space, be a part of the global south. We have to increasingly find ways to ensure that we're not so tied to the bootstraps of these wealthier countries, the global north that sets the agenda. Because however we want to look at it, they are going to decide what their priorities are. And so they will continually be changing how they distribute their funds, right? So this, I think, is a huge wake-up call to us.
Yes.
We have concerns about productivity, and we have concerns about how we use what we have that's available to us. And we really have to pay attention now, because there are lots of vulnerable people.
Yes.
And we have not been able to take care of them.
Hear you on that. Professor Waller, I'm almost out of time. I'll give you the last word. This whole adage of, it may have been a movie or a novel, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And of course, development, there you go. Thank you for that. Development diplomacy was the prime tool in that process of winning friends and influencing people worldwide. Against this America First policy that the man was voted in to implement, and that he has been implementing in the time he's been in the White House, 45, now 47, how does winning friends and influencing people around the world reconcile with America First?
Well, I think America First is not based on that book. It's based on the other one that Donald co-authored, you know. What's it called again?
The Art of the Deal? What?
Art of the Deal, right. I think people need to read the first 3 chapters, to be quite frank. As it relates to your question, the truth is that, you know, development diplomacy has been shifting, has always been based on strategy, you know. Many persons believe in the benevolence of it, but countries engage other countries for various reasons, and one of it is their strategic advantage. And if you take that into consideration, and of course we raise China, we're not going down the road, going anywhere beyond the surface with that conversation, right?
Yes, sir.
But if you look at China, if you look at Taiwan, if you look at even DFID, you know, Jamaica is still of some form of strategic importance. It's a game, it's a dance, you know. International relations is a game. There's an entire theory called game theory that is that speaks to it, and it evolves, and we have to also evolve. We have to monitor the changes and the trends in the international and global structure, and we have to try to see how best we pivot and see how best we could take advantage of this new emerging principle, practice, philosophy that seems to be permeating. But the truth is, and if you check the literature and if you look at the experiences, the development diplomacy has been evolving, especially in the last 10 years, to a more strategic looking creature that everybody is using and interacting with to achieve their own goals, to get some form of win-win outcome for everybody, for all parties. We have to be a part of that game. We have to understand the game. We have to learn. We have to partner with the right persons. We have to pivot. More important, the last thing, we have to pivot, and we have to be agile as we engage this new emerging world that we're working in right now.
Hear you on that. Professor Waller, thank you for your time this evening, sir. Really appreciate it. Anna Perkins, thank you as well for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
Well, USAID, topsy-turvy, sent on its head by this decision of Elon Musk. He says he told the boss that, look, it's costing us too much money, man. We have to shut it down. And he said, go ahead, Elon, do what is needed to save us money, do what is needed to put America first. That's what they're doing. We wait and see what happens after the 3-month evaluation period, and how, if at all, USAID returns to his former guise or is related to it. What will take its place and how effective that will be.
What would you do if a date asked you how much you weigh?